Good evening and welcome to I'm Listening Live. We are here to normalize and destigmatize talking about mental health. It is also Suicide Prevention Month and Suicide Awareness Month. That means we want to draw attention to making sure we're creating the kind of world that people want to be a part of. Also, we're looking at the impacts of things like social media. Social media has an impact on the functioning of our mental health. That's why we want to make sure all the things we are immersing our brains in give us pleasure, make us have joy, or at least have a neutral impact on us. So please check in. How do you feel before you go on your social media? How do you feel while you're using it? And most importantly, how do you feel afterwards? Unfollowing anything that makes us feel bad and is not supporting our mental health. We need all the resources we can around us. And of course, also some social media literacy, which also means turning it off before you go to bed and not starting your day by jumping right into all that's going on in the world. And finally, as always, I want to make sure I remind everyone to vote. Registering takes but a few minutes, so check in on your friends and family members and make sure that they're registered to vote. And when you get those mail-in ballots, make sure you are mailing them in. But we got a great show planned for you. We got Dr. Milo Dodson joining us, as well as Dave Richards, the founder of I'm Listening. Dave, welcome to your show.
Thank you, Chris. This is your show. This is very much your show. I think there are those of us who can be in the front and those of us who can be in the back. So thank you for doing what you do so well.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. This has been such a gift. And let's, for our listeners, can you give them the elevator pitch as to why and how I'm Listening came to be?
Well, I've told the story so many times, so it's ingrained in my head, and I can still picture it clearly. Right after Chris Cornell sadly took his life, if you're living here in Seattle, which as most people know is a relatively gray place half the year, you start to realize that a lot of our local musicians, some of the greatest names in the history of rock music, have taken their lives or have had their lives taken from them way too soon, way too soon. And we were standing outside of my office, and we got into a conversation. Somebody said, we need to do more than just complain about it. We need to do more than just grieve. Why don't we come up with a way to draw more attention to mental health awareness? So that must have been 2 months before the very first show 4 years ago, which we really just pulled together at the last minute, got some amazing guests. And each year since has become, how do we make this bigger? How do we grow our voice? How do we reach more people? How do we let everyone know that it's okay to not be okay? It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be heard. Probably everything you do in your 40-hour work week, it's people struggle. And now in this year, 2020, and this is something that's close to me, but not something that I've personally dealt with. But I can only imagine that 2020 has put people's challenges under a microscope and has made it even more challenging than ever before.
Yeah, and that's what I think is so powerful about people seeing the musicians that they idolize, humanizing themselves, which is such a gift, and talk about their own mental health struggles, which is what I think normalizes and starts to change the tides, because one of the mission statements of the show is to destigmatize and normalize talking about our mental health, and to see these celebrities and athletes being willing to do so has been so powerful. And also just the healing capacity of music. I think that's one of the things that I really walk away from doing the show with, is understanding how music can really support our mental health.
It's so true. It's so true. Look, it's been it's amazing in the beginning, finding some of the biggest voices in music and beyond to talk about some of their own personal struggles was pretty tough. And now we've got certainly more than we could put on this show that we're doing. More and more people are showing those the vulnerabilities. And the good news about that is, for whatever reason, people look up to celebrity. They picture them as having this perfect life, and nobody has a perfect life. The one that hit me the most was Anthony Bourdain, because we're the same age. we come from the same place. We both are cranky people. And I looked at this guy as an image of myself. And that's the one that really, really hit me. But everybody has someone who they connect to. So now seeing musicians, seeing athletes, seeing mental health spokespeople, folks like yourself, being able to get it out of people and let people talk about it and know that people are there listening. This morning, in prepping for the show tomorrow, I'm looking through probably about 100 letters to us.
Wow.
That want to be shared on the show. Now, we got well over 1,500 emails.
Wow.
But looking at some of the stuff that was sifted through, it's heartbreaking. It's really, really hard. And that's where I give somebody like you credit, because you listen to this all day. But, that many people who need to cope, and they need a way out. They need a way to channel this. So there's people like you who can help them.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to see individuals who are at the peak of their specific career, whether it's Anthony Bourdain as a chef and Chris Cornell as a musician, that you can be a high performer, you can be an achiever and still struggle with your mental health, which I want that to remind people. Don't assume because someone is perceived as doing well that they might not still be struggling. We have to still check in on everyone.
Absolutely. One of the letters I was reading this morning was a woman who was studying for her PhD, and during medical school, it all came crashing down on her. And it was at that point where, she realized that she was suffering from something. And as you know, getting through medical school, getting through law school is hard. That's pressure, man.
Yeah. And right now, with that happening for many people still, while in COVID, while in the time of the social justice movement, with the, anxiety around the elections, often amplified, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. You add fire, you add smoke, you add floods, you add storms. It's not been a good year. So, we're happy we can at least bring this to people so they know that somebody's listening to you. Somebody gets that.
That's right. Dave Richards, thank you so much for creating the show and for being a part of the show.
And thank you, Chris, for being the host.
Of course.
Appreciate
Have a great
it.
night. Be well. Bye-bye.
You too, man. Bye-bye.
All right. Yeah, I'm listening. It has an important role for all of us, but take the title and apply that to your lives. Make sure you are creating space to listen and to talk and process and share with those around you. That is how we maintain our mental health. And now let's go to our next guest, Dr. Milo Dodson. Welcome back to the show. How are you?
Man, I am maintaining and staying healthy. How about for yourself?
Pretty much the same. Yeah, as much as I can, amping up that self-care, lots of rest. Oof, it's a rough time. So let's just kind of jump into it. We got an important election coming up. A lot of people in my practice are starting to feel a lot of anxiety. It's showing up in all sorts of different ways. So when we talk about election stress, what kind of perspective should we be offering people?
Well, I think when we're talking about managing and maintaining stress around an election or any future day, it's really about the same general approach. So some of the specifics may be different. When we're thinking about election stress, we want to focus on what's within our control and what we're able to do. So folks, I would just want to encourage them to vote and to exercise that right as they are able. And then secondly, continuing to return to reflecting on the internal healing that we always should be all doing. So even for myself as a psychologist, continuing to practice that self-love and self-compassion. And sure, we want to think about the future events. We want to plan for the future. But that first most powerful step in that preparation is an internal one filled with self-compassion to kind of decrease some of that, as I'm sure you know, Dr. Chris, we call it the apprehensive expectation. We want to decrease that and increase that self-compassion.
I'm just using that word compassion as much as possible. Be compassionate for your lower level of productivity. Be compassionate for, the struggle you might be having as a parent. Just kind of dropping that bar down on that level. But also, like you said, taking action where you can. We get to have a little bit of power around possibly what happens with the election. So exercise that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also this compassion when we're able to connect with others that's even increased. So the internal compassion that we have for ourselves is always at 100%. It's always something that we can continue to rediscover. We don't have to create that. But when we're able to connect with others, we're able to manifest something that's bigger than just ourselves. And so, as we're all going through various levels of stress and different types of stress, the election being one of them, it's so essential for us to connect with others and be compassionate to ourselves by also being vulnerable, talking about the distress that we're experiencing, talking about the anxiety, talking about the depression, and like you mentioned, the low levels of productivity, like that's expected right now. If you're not, doing a whole 100% of what you're normally doing at your levels of productivity, that's okay. Because right now we're in a pandemic and we're gearing up for arguably one of the biggest elections in the history of this country.
Oh, when you just said that, I could feel the anxiety spiking in my own body. But, great segue where you said, it's really important that we're staying connected and we can do so via technology and social media. But let's talk about the darker side of social media, this new phenomenon called doom scrolling. So what exactly is that?
Yeah, so there's this trend that a lot of experts in the mental health arena are talking about where we're kind of, doing that mindless scroll and we're continuing to be so locked into the negativity and to any sort of pessimism out there. And I think it's important to point out where this comes from because in a sense, we're wanting to be knowledgeable or we're wanting to increase the information that we have to figure out how we can protect ourselves. But sometimes, even though knowledge is power, misinformation is not power. Misinformation is actually going to have a negative impact on our mental health. And even if it's accurate information, that can also have a negative impact because we're feeling overwhelmed. So, again, going back to how we started this conversation, focusing on what is within our control. So, I'm not going to tell somebody that they can't go on social media at all, but I would invite folks to consider how much time they're on social media and at what time of the day they're nourishing themselves or ingesting social media. So generally in the middle of the day, so you're not going to bed with all of this angst and this doomsday scrolling like you mentioned, and maybe not doing that the first thing in the morning, like you can't even see straight. And then all of a sudden you're trying to wipe the boogers out your eye thinking about what the next harmful thing that Trump is talking about. Like that's not a good combination.
And I think that's really natural for most people. They wake up and the first thing they do is roll over and grab for the phone, not knowing that they're, really weakening the foundation of the beginning of their day that way.
Yeah, and it's even funny, like tragically funny to think about. We're using our phones now as alarm clocks. So if we're really thinking about being compassionate to ourselves, investing in our mental health by buying like a $5 alarm clock, putting that next to the bed, putting the phone on the other end of the room, and then that way, one, we're not upsetting partners if we're sleeping with somebody, and then two, we're also being able to be intentional about the energy and the way that we're emotionally starting our day. That is so, so key. And again, that's an act of compassion.
Bam, because we're trying to center our mental health. Dr. Milo Dodson, thank you so much as always. Have a beautiful, beautiful night.
Thank you. You as well, brother.
Be well. As always, we want to be looking for any changes we can make that are going to really support our mental health and bookend our day with things that are really nourishing and put us in a positive space because we all know right now the world is throwing all sorts of curveballs at us. So for those that need some more support, we're going to put up some resources at the end of the show. We'll be back next week at 5 p.m. Pacific. That's 8 p.m. Eastern on all the radio.com handles. You can also go there to check out past episodes. As always, y'all, thanks for hanging out and you have a beautiful, beautiful night.